We already talked about the transform origin. There's also a setting where you can set the perspective origin. The same values used for the transform origin property may also be used with the perspective origin property, and you can maintain the same sort of relationship to the element. The largest difference between the two occurs where the origin of the transform determines the coordinates used to calculate the change of a transform. The origin of a perspective identifies the coordinates of the vanishing point of a transform. Let me show you what this looks like. Here's our starting file. We have 3 boxes, and this is similar to some of the things that we've done in the past. You'll notice the main difference is that on the div with the class of original, this is the gray box that sits behind the blue colored box. I've put an additional class of B1, B2, and B3, and that's so that I can target these things uniquely. What I'm going to go do is I'm going to add a rule on my orig class, and I'm going to set the perspective to 200 pixels. Now, as we learned in the last exercise, when we put perspective on something, it doesn't do anything by itself. It has to work with the transform that's applied to the child elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the box rule that we've already established, and I'll add a transform, and we'll just do a rotate X and set it to 45 degrees. If we save the page, all of the box elements are going to have the same sort of X rotation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change the perspective origin for each of these elements. So I'm going to use my B1 class, and remember, this class is actually added to the original parent element of the box. We're going to set the perspective origin, and we're going to use settings of 0, 0. If we save, when I refresh the page, you can see that the box 1 changes. So you can see the position of this element. Let's use some other modifications for the other 2 items. I'll make a rule for B2. We'll set our perspective origin, and this time we'll use percentages. So I'm going to set this to 75% and 75%. If we save and we check it out in the browser, you can see that this element looks quite different. Let's plug in some different values for the 3rd item. And again, setting perspective origin. This time I'm going to use a pixel value, so I'll use 30 pixels and 40 pixels. When we go look in the browser, you can see how this is very different. It is worth noting that it is possible for you to use negative values here, so if I change this to a negative 30, you can see that this is actually going to come out of the original position of the gray box. It also is possible to use keywords, so instead of using percent values or fixed values, we could also use keywords here. So if I change this to left and bottom, and we save and refresh, you can see that now this has changed the orientation of the first box. So the perspective origin property is going to determine the origin for the perspective property. You can think of it as the vanishing point of the current 3D space. The perspective origin always needs to be specified on the parent element in order to give the transformed children the depth that you're looking for. You can think of the perspective origin property as specifying where a 3D element originates from on the X and Y axes. When you're creating more sophisticated animations, perspective origin can help you get just the look that you want.